All right. Perhaps the biggest news in NFL circles as of recently has been around Russell Wilson. And now I feel like I have a particular qualifications to talk about this, with Russell Wilson being my favorite player for 10 years before he was traded to the Broncos
And
when
then
I
he was
fell to
your
my
least
knees.
favorite,
And
and you hated him. And
yeah, I fell to my knees and screamed out loud in a high school parking lot when I learned the news that he was traded. So I have pretty high emotional investment in this. But obviously, as a Seahawks fan, I can kind of finally, I mean, we already kind of knew that this trade was a huge win for the Seahawks as of last season, with the quality players and picks that they got, with the Broncos doing significantly worse than everyone thought they did, and Russell Wilson kind of combusting in front of everyone's eyes. But this has finally come to a head as Russell Wilson, with 2 games left in the season, with the Broncos still, as likely as unlikely as it may be, still in the playoff race, they bench him for Jarrett Stidham and are expected to cut him after the season is over.
the
Um,
guy who, for like 10 seconds in like 2019, people thought was going to replace Tom Brady on the New England
yeah,
Patriots,
but which never happened.
which never happened.
Um, Simon, what do you think about this just in general? Like what it means for the Broncos, what it means for the Seahawks, what it means for this trade, and
Well,
where
I
it ranks among the worst in NFL history potentially?
Well, if we're talking, I think that's a lot of different things. I think the
It is.
trade, yeah, that was quite a few different questions. I think the trade,
There's a lot to talk about.
my opinion on the trade has actually, I was one of the few Seahawks fans, I think even at the time, that didn't hate it, but that's only because I don't know. I like the fact that we were getting a lot of picks back, which worked out in our favor in the end. I
Yeah.
I mean, I was holding out hope that I think I was looking in the wrong direction. I was hoping Drew Lock would be good for us. I in my head, which again shows that I was still off. I'm still willing to fully admit that I was still wrong. I thought that he was gonna be the one that would work out better for us, and maybe I was thinking at the time that he just needed a better system. Gino was the one that actually worked out. Who the hell would have guessed that one though? Like, that
Nobody.
yeah,
Literally
nobody
nobody.
could have saw that coming. So the draft picks is where we really capitalized. People can talk all you want about Gino being as good as he was, but that's what won the trade. Like Noah Fant, I was hoping he'd be good for us, but he ended up just being eh.
He hasn't he hasn't been amazing. He's been good
He's been
when
what
we've
we
called on
should
him,
have
but
expected
it's
him to be is probably the best
yeah.
way to put it. Like he's been a good tight end, but it's not like we've
He
been.
will show up from time to time, but he's not a game breaker.
Yeah, that's a really good way to put it. Actually, that we got. I don't have the trade right in front of me. I should see if I can
So we
pull it up.
got I can probably pull it from memory. So we got the round 1 pick last year, which turned into Charles Cross. We
Yeah,
got round 2 pick that year as well, I believe, which was Boye Mafe. We have the Witherspoon pick, obviously. We got Devin
yeah.
Witherspoon, which was probably the most exciting part of the trade. We got Tyreek Smith was like a 5th round pick. We got Noah Fant, Drew Lock, Shelby Harris, and then maybe another pick thrown in there that turned into somebody that I can't get off the top of my head right now. But those are the
No, I
main
think
pieces,
that's.
and obviously,
Oh, I have it right in front of me.
obviously, okay.
Acquired.
See how accurate I
Oh,
was.
I don't have who they got with the picks. What I have
I can probably tell you that. I could probably tell you
two
that
first
if you
round
tell me
picks,
what the
2 second selections, Drew Lock. It doesn't have anything else actually, which is weird because you're totally right on the Noah
we
Fant,
did get
Shelby Harris because I
and
remember
Shelby
that.
Harris.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
I think Seattle might have traded that second rounder, that second one, because they got Boye Mafe with one of them, but I don't think they would have gotten anybody else with the other one.
okay,
I might
well
be wrong with that.
whatever it was, it doesn't really matter. It's Seattle won the
The
trade
big
by a hefty margin, taking out whoever we missed.
yeah,
Like it's
and the big pieces, I'm gonna look it up because it's gonna drive me crazy if I don't get this right. But the big pieces of it are um, Charles Cross, Boye Mafe, Devin Witherspoon,
Drew Lock.
and obviously with how Russell Wilson, okay, obviously with how Russell Wilson has played, um, with how Russell Wilson has played in the last 2 seasons and how Charles Cross is becoming a franchise left tackle who has played sneakily well, Devin Witherspoon should win Defensive Rookie of the Year, and Boye Mafe has 9 sacks this season. Do people not understand how good Boye Mafe has been? 9 sacks this season, is in one of the top edge rushers in his sophomore season, which is fantastic. Derek Hall was the other one, who was their second round pick from this year. He hasn't done much yet, but that's, again, it's his rookie year. Who knows what will happen?
Yeah.
But so those are the big pieces. It's obvious to say that the Seahawks won the trade.
Oh, really?
I don't think it's one of the worst. Yeah, I don't think it's one of the worst in NFL history. I think there's a lot more, like the Herschel Walker trade. I think you also have to see how Cross and Witherspoon and Mafe develop for the rest of their careers. If they can keep up the success that they've had, then we'll be able to truly say, like, if Seattle starts winning and gets to the Super Bowl with Cross and Witherspoon as like blue chip players, then you can say it's comparable to like the Herschel Walker trade in terms of building a potential multiple Super Bowl winner for the Seahawks, because that's what the Herschel Walker trade did. And until that does that for Seattle, then it's not the worst in NFL history, like I've seen some people say, but it's still obviously
like,
not
piece
great
for
because
piece, though, it's pretty bad. Especially out of
it's pretty bad.
Yeah. Like, it's not good.
I think the biggest thing that made this trade bad was last year, because Russell Wilson. I'll transition into the point I wanted to get to next. With this, Russell Wilson obviously first year was terrible, and that's part of why this trade was so bad. If it was just Russell Wilson for Charles Cross, Boye Mafe, it's like, okay, that's pretty bad, but you can sink that, and you'd probably be fine. But adding Witherspoon in that too, I think that is what makes this trade huge, and it's because Denver was so bad in that second season that they got that 5th pick. Because remember, when this trade was made, people assumed the Broncos were going to be Super Bowl contenders, so people assumed that first-round pick they were giving to Seattle in the next year was going to be like 25, 26, 27, in that kind of range. But it ended up being 5. That's where that's where the biggest value in this trade, more than anything, comes from. But so that's the bad part of this trade. But I think what the conversation kind of ignores is Russell Wilson has not played bad this year. He has been a decent middle of the road quarterback this year who just got paid way too much money. And I don't know what your opinions are of just looking at Russell Wilson, the quarterback now, but I think he does get a little bit too much hate.
No, I agree with you. Like, this year he has had a pretty damn good year. I think, or at least compared to last year. He's obviously still making too much money. There's no argument on that. But, I don't know. The main stats that I was looking at, because if we want to move a little bit more into, like, the fact that he got benched, because I think that's pretty interesting. And the fact that he's going to get cut, and where we might think that he might go. But,
And before you lead into stats about him being benched, it's important to say that part of the reason they benched him with 2 games left is because there's some sort of thing in his contract that says if he gets injured, the Broncos have to pay him like a shit ton more money. So that's why they're doing it now. So I'll let you go into the stats with that in mind.
I mean, there's even stats kind of backing up why they did it, because they're still technically alive in the AFC playoff race with a 7-8 record, but they do not control their own destiny. For one, they've gone 1-3 over the last 4 games with Wilson's play not being great. He's thrown 6 touchdowns and 4 picks.
Yeah. And I mean, the biggest thing is the Patriots game that just happened, because a lot of those, I mean, the Broncos had their hot streak. They won 5 in a row, and Russ was playing great. He beat some great teams like the Bills and the Chiefs. But it's that Patriots game that just happened on Christmas Eve. That's probably the final nail in the coffin, where it's kind of what we've seen from him all year on this Broncos team, where he's just he's not the difference maker he was with the Seahawks. He's turned into a game manager, almost like he was at the start of his career with the Seahawks. He isn't transcendent Russell anymore. He's not going to be the MVP level of player that he was. He's kind of just a game manager. I think he's pretty good at it, but he's not going to push you to win football teams against a team that has a sneaky good defense like the Patriots. But it's not... But the question of it's like, is that going to be any worse than what Jarrett Stidham's going to give you? I don't know, and it is very
Any
telling. The injury
worse?
thing aside,
Any worse?
I
No.
don't.
Any better? Yes.
Yeah. Obviously he's going to be better than what Jared Stidham's going to give. Like I don't have any faith in that. That's kind of what I meant to say. But
Yeah, yeah.
in when you're looking, it says a lot, I think, about where they were at with Russell, um, to bench him for two potentially very important games when they know they're going to get better quarterback play out of him. Just in terms of how fed up organizationally they are with him. Because I don't know if you've heard this, Simon, but Russell has known this is coming for a long time. Back in Denver's bye week, before they beat the Bills, they told him that if his play didn't instantly improve, they were going to bench him. So he's known that this is coming for a
When
long
was their
time.
bye week again?
And it was before they beat the Bills, which is I don't remember what week that was. I think it was like week 10.
Wow, that is wild.
But a long time ago.
Hmm.
A long time ago. So he's known that this is, and I think that honestly speaks to his character and his determination to be able to play with knowing that the axe is basically behind him the entire time. And all it took was this one performance for them to just say pull the plug on it. Which I think honestly sucks for him.
Yeah, yeah. I think he needed a reset. He's having a good year. Don't get me wrong, but this hasn't been working. Like nobody can really
Mhm.
sit here and tell you can't sit here and tell me that this has been working at all. I am more curious on where you think that he could go. Because obviously he's getting cut. He's controlling his own future here.
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah,
know.
and it'll be interesting to see. I don't know the exact details of the contract. I think that's the biggest thing. The Broncos are going to have to eat a lot of money um, to cut him, and it's like, and that's obviously going to hamper them. I don't know what kind of money he'd be looking for out in the free agent market. That's probably going to alter some things. But I think a couple things in terms of his next destination. I think number one, I think you're right that this wasn't working in Denver, and I think he will be even better than he was this year just because he doesn't have to have the pressure of the trade anymore. That's the big thing. He doesn't have to have the pressure of the trade, doesn't have to have the pressure of the contract. That can be all wiped clear. So he spoke about wanting to like stay in Denver, win championships in Denver. If I'm Russell Wilson, I do not want to spend another second in Colorado. Like I'm not I'm leaving that city, that state as soon as I possibly can. Because of just all the pressure and expectations that have been forced on him. Because he's been the butt of a joke for the last 2 years, and that cannot be good for any quarterback's confidence. I think he's not going to be that level ever again. Of
I think
quarterback
one
that he
thing
was in
that,
Seattle.
and this is just popping up in my own head, just right now. I'm curious how, because the one thing that I've heard constantly about this draft class is how good the QBs are across the board. Really good quarterbacks. I wonder how much that's going to affect maybe a potentially worse team on wanting to give him a lot of money, especially if they have a lower draft pick and have a chance at one of those quarterbacks. I'm curious how
Yeah.
that might impact things as well. I think there's a lot of factors to
Yeah.
consider.
Yeah, I don't think I mean, with the amount of young quarterbacks there are, there's still going to be some teams that are going to take him on as a potential starter. I don't think he's going to be a backup. I think someone is going to give him a starting job by the end of
I
this
cannot imagine
offseason.
him backing it up. Backing up. That'd be so
No,
weird.
I can't.
Like,
I can't.
he's
either.
in a world where, like, and this is not an insult on Josh Dobbs, but like prior to the season, in a world where Josh Dobbs is starting, and I don't know, to name a few, like, I can't even think of any others off the top of my head. Zach Wilson, I
there's-
guess Joe Flacco.
Yeah. A
although he's
lot of
been
it is
good.
with injuries. Yeah.
Yeah, like in a world where all of those players are capable of starting in an NFL game, and you're telling me Russell Wilson has to sit on a bench somewhere, I don't know, man. That feels very weird.
It's not
I
gonna
wasn't even thinking about him being a backup. I think that he totally could go somewhere else and start. Like I think a team like
Yeah.
I mean the Raiders, they have a couple of QBs at this point because they have Jimmy. How long is Jimmy G there for?
Jimmy G is not seeing another snap with the Las Vegas Raiders.
Okay, well.
There is no way. There's no way in hell. There's no way in hell.
I could see him potentially
They've already
playing
benched him
the
for Aiden
Raiders.
O'Connell.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna
There's
say.
no way. There's no way.
No.
If you bring back Jimmy G and the Raiders, fire everybody. Fire everybody.
I'm
Jimmy G
saying
should
that
not
I
start
think
another
that,
game in the
I was
NFL.
not suggesting that. I was saying that Russ could slide in there as a different veteran.
Okay.
That's what I was
Okay.
suggesting. I did not mean that Jimmy G was gonna come back.
I
was asking what his
hear
contract
any Jimmy
was
G
like.
praise.
I was asking about his Jimmy G's contract and how long he was with the Raiders because I think that would impact whether they'd want to sign another veteran QB. But I mean, off the top of my head, other than that, what other spots would potentially be open? Maybe the Browns. No, they have Deshaun Watson locked down.
They have Deshaun.
Um,
Okay. In terms of potential landing spots, like the Raiders is a good one. I think that's a spot I could see him. Another spot I could see him in is the Falcons.
how good is Ritter?
The Falcons, not great. They benched him again. He's been benched twice.
Okay. Well, yeah, that's one I could see.
He is not the future. It'll be Russell coming in. If Arthur Smith survives another year, that's a terrible mistake. So it's probably Russ with a new coach, which probably is good for him. You got the Bucks could be a
And
potential
a lot of
option.
weapons. I actually really like the idea of the Falcons. Because
Yes, the Falcons would be fantastic.
that'd be really. I think that would work really well for him too. Like
Yeah,
for the first
the only
time
thing
in his
with-
career since like, I don't know, Marshawn Lynch. I don't consider Javonte Williams to be a good or an incredible running back. He's gonna have an elite running back to work with. He'll have Drake London's a pretty good wide receiver. You'll have Kyle Pitts as a pretty easy backup plan if he ever gets more than a certain amount of catches. Darn you, Arthur Smith.
Yeah.
He's gonna have a lot of weapons in that offense, and who knows, they could even bring in more in the offseason. Because that, if they go and get Russell, that'd be a win now move. I think that'd be them putting all of their eggs into the season, whether you want to, because they're in a position where they don't need to win now, which is kind of my only argument against them. Just because I almost feel like you'd rather go young QB because your running back, your star running back's young, your star wide receiver's young, your star tight end's young, everybody's young. You don't need to go out and sign a veteran right now, right? So that's the only reason I kind of disagree on the Falcons. Not that they'd be a bad team or not that I don't think it'd be a good fit. More just the fact that I don't know what's necessarily in it for the Falcons. You'd just be rushing and all just to take a risk on a guy who hasn't been incredible for the last 2 years.
Yeah, I think their thing is like they're in a weird spot in the draft right now. Right now they sit at number 10. The top three, Caleb Williams and Drake May are going to be the top two. Then you've got Jaden Daniels won the Heisman. He's going to be up there as well. Those three are all going to be probably gone by the time that the Falcons pick. And then the next QBs are a pretty definitive tier down because you've got Bo Nix, Michael Penix, and J.J. McCarthy from Michigan. Like, those guys are all kind of late first-round picks. If you're the Falcons, are you taking a shot there with at number 10 to reach on one of those guys? I don't know.
You could reach.
So maybe they want to take... Yeah, they could do a lot of stuff. But they are in a place
That's
where
a better point. That makes me more
quarterback-
confident about Russ going there. Actually.
Yeah, it could happen, but I also agree with you in terms of a young quarterback. I think is better for them.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting. They've got if we're looking at other potential teams, you can cross like Commanders, Patriots would be interesting fits, but they're probably going to draft a young quarterback. I could see terrible.
Oh, lovely.
He's been benched.
Oh, okay. This should show how much I've watched, how much time I've had.
Yeah.
I've just for context, I'm busy. Move on.
Yeah. I don't know how attached the Saints are to Derek Carr. That could be another one I'd see.
That's another one where I think you just need to look at the contract.
Yeah.
Although the idea of him, Russ and Sean Payton basically swapping is
that would be kind of funny.
But I don't know.
Although for the Saints, the Russell Wilson thing is kind of that seems like their kind of thing because they've been making lateral moves like that for a long time.
That's
Anyways,
true, I guess.
Raiders we've talked about. I don't know what Kirk Cousins' situation is like in Minnesota. That could be an interesting
I was gonna
one.
say that one, but it sounded like Kirk was coming back because Jefferson wanted him back. and that makes me
Okay.
fairly confident that
Yeah.
if your star wide receiver says that he wants you to keep your quarterback, you're not going to trade your quarterback, right? Like you're
Yeah.
going to bring back Kirk. Especially, I don't know how much Kirk would cost. Is he's on a contract for a while, isn't he? Or is he a free agent?
No, he's a free agent. He's a
Okay.
free agent.
Well,
next
coming
year.
off an Achilles injury, I'm assuming his price wouldn't be too crazy. I'm assuming they're just going to bring him back. He also
They'll probably
was pretty
bring him
good.
back. But
He was also
he was
pretty
very
good.
good. He was very
before
good.
He got
I think
hurt.
his price will be higher than you think, even with the injury, because
Okay.
he was very good. But I don't know where I could see him coming back. A lot of this is very up in terms of where Russ goes. It's very up in the air.
Yeah.
Just because we don't know who people have drafted, we don't know what free agency is going to be like. We don't know what the coaching situation is going to be like for a lot of these teams. A lot of
What
these
do you
teams are going to
think-
fire their coaches.
What do you think on like a Patriots?
Well, the Patriots are probably just going to draft somebody. That's where
Yeah. That's more
I'm
from
looking
me
at
going,
this.
they don't have a quarterback, and Russ in a Patriots jersey would make me want to jump off a bridge.
Yeah, it would. I saw a jersey swap of that recently.
Did you
and
actually?
It made me.
Oh,
It made me physically ill. Yeah.
yeah.
That was pretty awful.
What's another team that's kind of like that? Like in division, imagine him on like Arizona for some reason. Although Kyler's paid for a while, I guess.
Kyler's. Thankfully, all the people in division have quarterbacks. Like, if he
Yeah.
ever pulls a Richard Sherman and goes to the Niners, like that's when I'm actually gonna jump off a bridge.
Oh
But
my
it's not
God.
gonna happen. So
That'd be so gross.
they've
Goes
got
to the
they've got
Rams.
Purdy.
Stafford doesn't
Yeah,
come
it's
back
not
next
gonna
year.
happen.
Goes to the Rams. Holy crap.
It's not gonna happen.
Hell would
But-
rain.
Yeah.
Ugh.
So I'll
What's
I
a
can
couple
end
other?
this.
Well, I was
can-
gonna
you
say
know,
I wanted to add on one more question actually, because I think this is
Okay.
the next step in this entire thing. What do you think's next for the Broncos?
Okay. For the Broncos, I think it's interesting because Sean Payton has kind of crashed and burned. Honestly, one of Sean Payton's primary jobs when he was brought into this Broncos team was to revive Russell Wilson. Now, I'm not saying he can't have success past that because obviously he can.
He
But this has
kinda
been a disaster of a season,
Did
and he kind of did,
Yeah.
but not to the point where they got what
to
they
the
were
old
expecting.
level. Yeah, he
Yeah.
revived him in the same way that he kind of, if you want to look at it like this, kind of revived Drew Brees after he couldn't throw anymore past 25 years.
Yeah.
Like
But the other thing is though, sure he maybe brought him back. I don't know how much of it was Russell, how much of it was Sean Payton. We'll never know in terms of getting him back up to speed. But you can also tell that Sean Payton did not trust Russell Wilson like from the jump. Like there's a lot like he's screaming at Russell Wilson on the sideline for literally doing nothing. He's calling him out before the season even began. And you can say, sure, maybe Russell needed some of that hard love, and I think that could be a part of it, but I also think Sean Payton just didn't believe in him from the get-go. So I think his tenure is already off to a rocky start.
yeah, I guess. I guess I just don't understand why Sean Payton would want to come to the Broncos if he didn't believe in him from the start. That logic doesn't make sense to me. That's the only reason I don't follow. Because like what else is here in Denver that would make him want to be here?
There's lots of good pieces in Denver, right? They have a pretty
guess.
decent
But,
we always
like,
forget
you'd
that a
think-
year ago they had the best defense in the league.
Okay.
They were the best defense
Okay.
in the league. And
But
they have
a good
Surtain, they have
defense
lots of
can't
young
get
players.
you very far if your quarterback's Stidham.
Yeah.
Which
But,
is
I don't know,
the
I think-
wall that he's quickly walked himself into. I mean, I don't know what he expected, I guess. If he never thought Russell was
Yeah.
going to pan out and he still came here
Yeah.
and now he's sitting here. Let's say he saw this entire thing coming. And now Stidham's his quarterback and they're 7-8. Their pick's not going to be anything crazy. They might be a team that I could definitely see one of those later first round picks you were talking about landing on. If they even have their first. Do they have their first this year? They do, right?
The Broncos? Yep, they do. They
Okay.
do.
Well, then
Yeah.
that's one I could potentially see them. I could see them landing probably around 20 with that 7-8 record, maybe a little bit higher than that, like maybe mid 15, 16 area. I could see them either trading back or like maybe reaching on a QB.
They're at 14 now.
Yeah. Like, do you think it'd be out of the picture for them to reach and try and grab? No,
No.
not from there.
The other thing is that I'm not the biggest I'm not the biggest draft guy. Like I follow the draft closer than a lot of people, I think, but not to the standard of a lot of actual people who watch like tape and stuff. But a trend that I've noticed is that quarterbacks in the draft process from February to April, where the Super Bowl is over and the focus is on the draft, quarterbacks rise because people need quarterbacks. You look at mock drafts now, they're not going to be the same, and people are going to start having players like Bo Nix, Michael Penix, JJ McCarthy. They're going to start creeping into the
that's
team.
the thing, because you hear. I feel like I've even heard a lot of things from a lot of different people about like players like. I was Bo Nix one of the later ones. I feel like I hear his name a lot. Like Jaden Daniels was the other one where like one of those names where like they're a guy who you're saying late first round pick. I've heard people say like higher mid first round pick for
Jaden Daniels. I say high. Jaden
Yeah.
Daniels is high at this point.
Yeah, like I've heard a lot of those later quarterbacks you mentioned talked about as like a mid to first, but that's coming from my very casual draft knowledge on this draft class. I'll learn more in the offseason.
I mean that always solidifies when we know draft order, and B people start getting more into the scouting and hearing more from the teams as to what the rumors of what they want to do, what they don't want to do, that kind of thing. But either way, like I think the Broncos, if we're going back to the future of the Broncos, I think young quarterback's probably the only way they can go, or just trying to ride out the year with some backup level player, because the Rust contract is going to hamper them bad for the rest of, because they're going to have to get a lot of guaranteed money. That's going to take up a lot of their cap space, and they're going to be prevented from doing a lot. So they're going to have to invest in rookies. They're not going to have a lot of choice.
Yeah, I'd almost argue
one
that
of
you
the
just
least appealing teams to watch in the next few years, just because they're honestly just because of this Russell Wilson.
I'm very interested. I was about to say. I wonder what the cut's gonna look like for Russ. Where like, is that just them paying it off like he's here? Like, what does that necessarily? I don't know how cutting in the NFL works. Like, because I mean, NHL, MLB, you always hear about them just basically like spreading it across like 40 years in some case. Like, I think of
it's not going to be like that.
DiPietro, I forgot how to say his name. I should remember how to say his name. Whatever.
So
you know who I'm talking about.
Let's
Islanders
get some
given 20-year contract, like similar things to that level.
Okay, so this is what I'm getting from just looking up the cap numbers. If they designate, if they release him before March 17th, which they would, he'd have a cap hit of $85 million, and that could be spread out over 2 years, $34 million in 2024 and almost $50 million in 2025.
And that'd be it.
So that's obviously not great. That's obviously,
Okay.
I think that's it. Which
so
is not.
very
It's not
long.
terrible in terms of.
In terms of
It's not
length.
terrible in terms of length, but for those 2 seasons, $50 million is not an insignificant number. You're
That
working with a lot less of your cap than other teams would be.
You'd basically be playing like whatever rookie QB you grab is making $50 million if you want to look at it like that. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, that's rough, man. Like, at least it'd be gone before you'd have to pay him, most likely, right?
If you get a rookie, yeah, that's why I say it's like the only thing they can do.
That's the only
because you can't bring in
no,
another
can't
good
bring
quarterback.
anybody else. Like, then imagine they bring in Kirk. Like, Kirk needs to be good.
Yeah, they don't have the money for that.
Oh, yeah,
they don't
that
have
too.
the money for that.
That too. Yeah.
Because then you have to pay other players. Like I don't remember how long ago Surtain was drafted, but I'm sure that's coming due in the next 2 seasons at least, right? I think he was 2020, 2021. 4 years are running up real fast, right?
Yeah.
It's
Jeez,
a terrible predicament.
God, he feels
Yeah,
like
time moves fast.
Ain't
Time
that the
moves
truth?
fast.
Yeah, geez.
But I'll end the segment with one last thought. So we've gone over kind of the future and potential landing spots. I'll go to potential landing spots again. This is a long shot, and this probably will not happen. But what do you think about Russell Wilson potentially returning to Seattle?
I was laughing before you said it. Okay. So for this to happen, I think a lot of things need to happen. For one, I wouldn't like it. I would not be a fan.
Neither would I. My nostalgia bone would get perked up, but other than that, I wouldn't like it.
You
It's not
can't
a good
sit
move.
here in front of me and tell me that he, at this point in their careers, is better than Gino. No.
Yeah.
No,
He's
he is not. And I think
At most, he's at the same level. At most, he's at the same level.
yeah, exactly. And like I feel like Gino honestly works better in our scheme than Russ would at this point. I feel like the type of offense we have is pretty different to what we had with him. And I think that's a good thing in a lot of ways. I think we rely a lot more on the players we have instead of just letting Russ cook, which I appreciate a lot more now.
Yeah.
I like the style we have a lot more. You know what? If nobody wants him as a starter, I wouldn't hate him as a backup. I actually think that'd be rather cool. Seeing Russ and Gino in the same QB room again, I would not hate him as a backup. But I would hate him as a starter, at least at this point with the team we have. It just wouldn't make sense for me. Is there Seattle Seahawks fans who want that?
There's rumblings. There's rumblings. I think it's because a lot of people, including me, are thinking this is Gino's last year in Seattle. He has a 2-year contract, but you can very easily get out of it this offseason. And I think they're going to. I don't think Gino is the Seahawk next year. I think they're gonna probably pick up a younger guy.
Whoa.
Or even if they keep him, I think they will draft a young quarterback anyways. If
I'd be
Gino
more
is a
up
Seahawk
for
next year,
that.
that will be his last year.
Okay.
Yeah. I think the biggest thing is this offense is entirely underperformed, and I think a lot of that is scheme wise. But I think people are very just especially the last couple weeks, like this last game against the Titans, the offense was entirely dead till the end. Against the Eagles, entirely dead to the end. Other than like the Cowboys game, our offense has been basically on life support. People are looking for something. I think that's where the Russ talks have come about. But I don't think it's gonna, like
I
you
don't
said,
think
it's not
that's
gonna
the
move the
something you
line.
want.
That's kind of my perspective on it. Exactly, it's not gonna move the line.
I'm curious. Now you've got me wondering where Gino would even go, because I mean we were looking at it right there. The QB market is pretty dim. Like as for play, there's a lot of very good QBs right now, or if not very good, solid starters.
The draft will change up a lot of things. Quarterbacks will come back from injuries, and there's lots of very good free agent quarterbacks. Like Kirk Cousins and Russell Wilson alone will headline a great free agent class.
You want to look even
and if
further
Gino
past
gets added
that,
to that.
probably like I think Josh Dobbs would have the opportunity to get quite a bit of money. I think he's a free agent after this year. You'd have.
And with his recent performances, I probably wouldn't count on that too much. But
Oh, okay, well then again, I'm living in week 10, so the
You are. he's the third. He's the third
Joe
string on
Flacco.
the
The next, he's elite now. Pay him $40 million.
He's been really good.
He has been good, although 10 touchdowns, 7 picks. That's not good.
Yeah, that doesn't tell the full story. But
Yeah.
either way, that this next offseason, I think it's going to be the most. I think we're going to have a lot of content for Trick Play. Because
Yeah,
I think,
no, I
this
agree with
next
you.
offseason.
You
is
think
going
we
to be
talk
the most
enough about the
interesting in the
NFL, or you ain't seen nothing?
Yeah, I think this next offseason is going to be probably one of the most interesting in recent years because I'm thinking quarterback carousel, but also coaching carousel. Those two things, I think there's going to be more coaches fired than there have been in the last decade or so, and I think there's going to be a lot of quarterbacks changing spots or young guys
I
getting
hadn't thought of that. You keep on this segment's going on forever because we keep. The nice thing is I almost feel like we could just loop this around into an NFL segment because we've talked a lot about a lot of different things actually, which I like. That's why I'm not rushing to end this. Normally I'd be like, but I think we've hit on a lot of things. I think we can name this a lot of different things, but. I think that coaching carousel comments is pretty accurate because I hadn't thought about that either. I think there's a lot of I agree with you. I think there's a lot of people who are on the hot seat right now, and a lot of people who will not be sticking around too long. I'm curious what that's gonna look like. Like I'd love to see a list of that because off the top of my head I'm struggling a little bit to come off with a lot of examples.
I mean, think of if we're going to the coaching carousel already, so I'm thinking we've already had a couple firings. We've got
True. There's a
we
few interim
have
coaches.
Frank Reich. We've got Josh Josh McDaniels in Las Vegas. We've got Brandon Staley in LA. We've already had three that, other than Antonio Pierce in LA, I don't think any of those guys are sticking around. In
Yeah.
terms of guys on the hot seat, let me just list off some of them. So all these guys that have been hired in the last year are probably safe. Dennis Allen, I could see him in New Orleans falling by the wayside. Todd Bowles is a maybe. That's a iffy one. Arthur Smith, definitely. I would have said Salah before the news this week. Um, Ron Rivera is probably gone. You've got
Bill
um,
Belichick.
Bill Belichick is definitely gone.
Well,
I
that was already
could, and then
announced.
yeah, there's so that's a lot, and then there's other guys that are kind of on the edge. Like Mike Vrabel's probably not getting fired, but it could happen. Um, and then there's a couple real wild cards in there that definitely
I
that
feel what a
probably will
real
not get
wild
fired.
card
But
being like I feel even like weird saying it, but Pete Carroll. Like imagine if
yeah,
they
Pete
decided to go
Carroll
in
and
a
Mike
different
Tomlin.
direction. Oh really? Oh okay, yeah. So pretty dead on that one because that would have been my other guess actually,
Yep.
Tomlin. Like
Yeah, which those two are probably not going to happen. It's like
no.
a 95% chance that they stay.
Well,
But
I still think that Tomlin's a
it could,
really good coach. I have such a hard time
but
saying that.
when you've been with a team that long, they might have to say it's time for something new eventually. But who knows? But that's a really solid list of guys that are
Fuck,
probably definitely
that's
getting
such a
axed at
hard.
the end of the
Tomlin's
year.
so hard for me, because he has such good defenses. Like, do you really want to lose that? Like, that's the only reason Pittsburgh wins anything, right? And the offense has been stagnant for 5 years at this
But they've
point.
but they've been treading water overall for the last few years. They've had
True.
a winning season every year. Yep, Tomlin can't
But I
have a
think,
losing
but the
season.
treading water part, I think, is more just because of the QB carousel. Carousel, a lot of offensive coordinators now coming in and out. Like, I think you just need to figure out that offense, and I don't think that's Tomlin's fault. I think you just need to do something. If you want to try something new, I feel like the offense is the thing you have to try new. You're losing out on a really, I think, too good of a defense if you get rid of Tomlin. That'd be
Yeah.
my
I,
logic.
I
But
again,
then
I
again,
don't
I can
think they
see.
will, and I think the same argument can be made for Pete too, right? Like that's why I don't think Tomlin's getting fired, to exactly to your point, and I don't think Pete will either. Not because of his defense, because Pete Carroll's defense has not been great the last few years, but just because of the culture he creates. People want to come to Seattle because Pete Carroll is such a fantastic coach and creates such a great locker room culture. Like there has been stories out there of how many players want to play for Pete Carroll. That's why a lot of people come back. Like Bobby Wagner coming back is because of Pete Carroll. Um, so that those two, like, there's a reason those two guys are among
Russell
the
Wilson
all-time
coming
greats at
back
this point.
is because of Pete Carroll.
Yeah. There's a chance we could
Us
say
trading
that. There's a
Geno
chance we
Smith
could say
for a
that.
7th round pick and bringing and Russell Wilson and then going 0-16 is because of Pete Carroll. Can't wait.
But yeah, no, like those two guys probably aren't getting axed. But to wrap up that kind of point, it'll be a lot of
Was
open
there any other
jobs, a
NFL
lot
things
of
we wanted to hit
vacancies.
on? I can't remember. Did we have another NFL one?
I mean, we had the Hall of Fame stuff. I don't know if we want
Oh,
to talk
that's
about
too
if we
long.
want to like add in the Jets as just an addendum to this segment. Do you want to get a couple minutes off on that?
Sure. Yeah,
Just
let's
to
do it.
because it's kind of related to what we were talking
So-
about. So
Just for
I
context,
didn't
I
mention
actually
Salah.
every podcast that I want to talk about or how we do this to explain why there's a lot of times that we talk about things in the intro and then never hit on it. It's because we record the intro first, and there has been a lot of times where we'll come up with this week or this list generally over the week where Caleb has he'll grab stuff off the score. I'll put things in my noggin. Oh, this week it's all Caleb. I didn't have any time. I've been working. Anybody around Alberta and maybe you know a bit about junior hockey might know what the Circle K Classic or the Max Midget tournament is. I've been working for them, so I've been very busy this week. So I haven't had time to do that. This is all Caleb. Um, but yeah, usually we just run out of time if we don't talk about something. to explain that. Behind the scenes, we don't know what we're doing.
Yeah, we should probably do the intro last.
I've had
From
that
now
thought
on, eh?
so many times.
I'm just thinking that we
Really?
should do that now.
I
think we should.
The only reason that we're gonna continue to go into the behind the scenes shit. The only reason I don't like the idea of it is the fact that I'm doing it and I know that by the end I'm so low energy. Like usually by the end of the podcast.
Oh wow.
And what do you say?
Oh well. Oh well. You can
I can pull something
take
out
a
of my
shot of
ass
something.
that's,
You can take a shot of something caffeinated and muster up energy for 30 seconds at a time.
That's true. I could do that. Yeah. It's not a bad idea. Whatever. Next week.
Look at us go.
Next
Behind
week,
this behind
this
the
week
scenes
we also
podcast.
just I won't even get into how scuffed of a setup we're working with this week for about because I left my computer charger at an arena. It's been a week, but that's okay. It's been lovely. I'll probably talk about it a bit during the outro because I have a pretty cool shout out, at least for my standards. But the we'll get into that later. Anyway, Jets bringing back Sala and Douglas.
Yeah, we'll touch on that real quick. So I can give the argument against keeping them. So I because we kind of talked about this a little bit
that's
before,
right,
and
yeah.
you said you weren't really surprised, and I can see that.
No.
There's the argument to be made that it was a wasted year as soon 4 plays in, but you have to take into consideration how long Robert Saleh and Joe Douglas have been doing this, and I think there's different arguments against each. I think Saleh has been a decent to good coach this whole time,
Yeah.
but he has also he has not had a successful team. He's built a good defense, which you could argue
He's
he
not
was
had
there
a
to
good
do.
offense. I think is the more thing
yeah.
that's been hard.
He is he is a defensive coach.
Yeah.
He is a defensive coach. But yeah, he has not had a successful team his entire tenure, and he's been there for a little while now. He's been there since
how long is that?
2021. So he's 2021. So that's about 3 years, which about is normally as long as a coach gets. Which
The
I think
thing
is what people are talking
usually
about.
when you hear a coach get fired after 3 years, it's usually for a lot of reasons. And I feel like the only one you really have on Saleh is the lack of success. But I feel like the lack of success, especially this year was going to be his successful year. Aaron Rodgers doesn't get hurt, we're not having this conversation. They would have been a lot better. I don't think that's much of an argument because just solely with how good their defense was, A-Rod would have at the very least had a decent offense. Like, let's say A-Rod was worse, like significantly worse. He became an average QB. That's still a lot better than what they had this year. And I think they would have probably been a playoff team, if not close. And I think we would be having this conversation.
I think that's true, but I also think you have to look at, and now this is up in the air as to whether you think this is important or not. But I think just the whole way that this situation has been handled, a lot of this is on Joe Douglas too, but the Jets just didn't have a backup plan after Rodgers went down. I think that the sign of good both coaching and management is being able to bounce back from something like that. You have to have had a plan in place.
I want to jump in there too, though, because I think I don't think anybody could have predicted, for one, that A-Rod would go down the way he did. He does not have that crazy of an injury history, for one. Going into this year, would you have said that Zach Wilson is a below-average skilled backup quarterback?
Absolutely.
Absolutely? Really? Okay. So that's not what I was expecting. Because in my opinion, before this year, I think Zach Wilson, while he's still young, I think that most people would have said that the
potential is that potential, but potential isn't play.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, he has great potential and he flashes that.
But do you blame Douglas and Saleh for not having someone other than Zach Wilson on the roster? Really?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
I'd like to hear the logic behind that.
This is probably their biggest. Yeah, this is. I mean, this is a point that's been made. Again, the NFL podcast I listen to a lot is Around the NFL. Dan Hans is on there. He's a Jets fan. He made this point a bunch, and it's something I really agree with. You have to look at the greater NFL. Because in the NFL, this has been the year of the starting quarterback getting injured and the backup coming in and preserving a season. You had Josh Dobbs in Arizona and Minnesota, and up until recently played great. You had And other quarterbacks in Minnesota have played relatively well. Nick Mullins, even though he's thrown lots of interceptions, has kept them in games. You look at places like Cincinnati, Jake Browning, who, other than this last game against the Steelers, has kept them afloat. You look at a team like even the team that the Bengals just played, Pittsburgh. Mason Rudolph is looking fantastic. There was another example I had. You can go all over the league with this, right? You've got, I'm thinking of other ones, like even Baker Mayfield. People didn't expect him to be good. You've got, even like, this is kind of more of a fluke story, but Tommy DeVito. But then the big one, especially when it comes to the Jets, is Joe Flacco. As of recently,
yeah, that's a good point.
You've got Joe Flacco in the building. They had him in the building.
That's a very good point.
He was their backup quarterback last year, and they decided they'd rather stick with the duo of Zach Wilson and Trevor Siemian and Tim Boyle. This is where it comes down to. Sure, Zach Wilson, you keep him on there because he has potential. He was going to learn behind Rodgers. Okay, I don't think he should have been the backup. You should have had a better plan in place, especially when you have a guy like Joe Flacco. Okay. But look at what they got rid of Joe Flacco for. Tim Boyle, who was terrible even in college. He is not an NFL starting caliber quarterback by any stretch of the imagination. And do you know why they brought Tim Boyle in? Which is why I'll let you jump in after this.
Okay.
But they brought Tim Boyle in because he is Aaron Rodgers' friend. And that is a big reason why this Jets management team has been terrible, is because, like the Packers before them that ruined the Packers, they are letting Aaron Rodgers run their franchise because that's what he does. And that should have been the downfall. You can't pin it as much on Saleh, but that should be the downfall of Joe Douglas, if nothing else. That whole backup quarterback situation, which links in very nicely to letting Aaron Rodgers run the franchise and bringing in a bunch of below-average guys like Lazard, Cobb, Tim Boyle, and the rest. That is my ultimate argument against Joe Douglas and the whole management team.
So, I will say, you kind of swayed me a little, but I want to explain exactly why. Because I think you can't necessarily... it's the end that gets me, where the Tim Boyle stuff, because you're totally right on that. That you hit right on the nail, I think. Where, like, yes, they should not have grabbed Tim Boyle. There's no defending that. They could have kept Joe Flacco. They should have. In this case, they should have. You're absolutely right. Before the year, I think that I would have thought of Zach Wilson as a decent backup, but not better than Joe Flacco, I guess. I guess you're right on that. Like, they couldn't have expected all of these players. For one, they couldn't have expected all those quarterbacks to break out. No way. No one in a million years thought this could have happened. If you told me that you fully thought the second that Kyler Murray went down, that they'd be fine because they had Josh Dobbs, you are a fucking liar.
Yes. However, to that point, I thought of another example. Gardner Minshew is another one who's been playing great in Indianapolis.
Although,
but
I think that he
Simon,
at least had a couple good starting years that were somewhat recent.
Simon.
Yes.
You say this as if this is only a before the season issue, and you forget that Aaron Rodgers went down in week 1, and they had all the way up into the trade deadline to fix their problem. And they decided to not do anything about it. Do you know who got traded at the deadline after he had his breakout weeks? Josh Dobbs. So it's not a question of whether we would have known this was coming or not. Because we've already seen it.
Yeah, they didn't need to. That's a fair point. That's a really good point.
Yeah.
Like I said, you did kind of sway me on that. I don't think I agree, though. You made a good point at the end, which you can't blame Saleh for that, and I totally agree. I don't think... I think the Tim Boyle thing is what really put the nail in the coffin for me, because the fact you get rid of Joe Flacco, quarterback who has won a Super Bowl. Why wouldn't you just keep that locker room? Like Joe Flacco, Aaron Rodgers, Zach Wilson. That sounds pretty damn good. Right? Like, even before
Aaron
this
Rodgers
year.
would rather be buddies with Tim Boyle. That's why.
Aaron Rodgers doesn't like Joe Flacco? Ooh, drama.
I mean, we don't know that, but we know he likes Tim Boyle. We know that.
Fair. Should have brought the guy. I forget his name. Oh, Ben Kurt. He went from being like a quarterback to like a Madden YouTuber. They should have brought him in. That would have been funnier. Have you ever seen that? Like he went from like
No.
backing up the Packers and the Atlanta Falcons to now he like teaches nerds online
Oh,
how to play
oh.
Madden.
Oh, Kurt Bankert?
Yeah,
That
yeah,
guy?
yeah, yeah. Have you ever
Yeah.
seen that stuff? I think it's really funny.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
he's like properly
Yep.
teaching people how to like read defenses in Madden.
Oh yeah, I've seen that. I think
I-
that's cool.
It is
Um,
cool. I will
he
say
probably-
it
he
keeps
probably
me
would have been better
occupied.
than
I'll
Tim
like
Boyle.
when it comes up on my feed on. Yeah, honestly, I don't know if I disagree with that based on the stuff I've seen on him prior, but I just think it's funny because I think that's taking Madden a little too seriously. But I mean, I will admit it has me watching because it's like it's an NFL player's
yeah, it's
experience.
interesting.
Like it is interesting to see how they read it. But it is also funny to me. And it would have been a lot funnier to me if they brought in Kurt Benkert to replace Aaron
And
Rodgers. Get him off the couch.
He would have been better. He would have been better.
Yeah.
Because
At least he's played quarterback, whether it be online or
Yeah.
not.
Yeah. And I mean, to kind of wrap up the Jet stuff, like, it's the reason that I think you fire. I think Jets fans have to be disappointed that they're not firing Saleh and or Douglas. It's not because Aaron Rodgers went down. Obviously, they had no control in that. It's
But-
because of how they handled. It's
Can
because
I-
of how they handled that situation.
Can I add
On
one
both
thing that just
the
occurred to me that I
GM
think-
side, sure,
I
yeah.
just want to add this because I'm curious to get your opinion on this, which I think this could be. I mean, this is almost a non-issue because you could make the argument less or so for Saleh. This is more for Douglas. How Douglas is already kind of in Aaron Rodgers' pocket, but could you not see a world where like they fire Douglas and they bring in somebody who is literally just another person who would be in Aaron Rodgers' pocket? Like, do you really think they'd bring
Yep.
in, like, that's probably what would end up happening. So it's not like it would
You could,
matter.
yeah.
Considering most of the issues you
You could
had
you
with
could
Douglas,
definitely make that argument.
most of your issues with Douglas has been the fact that he's almost just been Aaron Rodgers' decoy
yeah.
a little bit, right? What's the chance
And
they bring in a guy who isn't that?
So that's up to ownership, right?
Yeah.
And that's a fair point. That's a fair point. Is who are they going to bring in that's any better? And if you're on the optimistic side, you could say there's probably is a lot of people they could bring in that would be better. But yeah, that is a fair point to make. But I do think just in terms of what you've seen, I think they can still make it work with Saleh and Douglas. We've seen good things from them. It's not all bad. This isn't a Josh McDaniels situation where it's like it's very clear they need to go. Saleh has again had a good defense.
I've actually liked
improved
Saleh
the
for the
team
most part.
He's left it better than he's found it. Same
That's
with
very
Douglas. I think before this season, Joe Douglas has brought in good players and built a good team.
Very good drafting.
However,
I think the
Yeah,
Jets
exactly.
drafting, people don't talk about that enough. They've almost built solely through the draft, other than Aaron.
yeah. Yeah. But I think this season has been enough of a bungling to where I can understand the frustrations to where you say it's time to go. Because on the GM side, you brought in a bunch of Aaron Rodgers friends that didn't work out, and you did nothing to address the backup quarterback situation. You basically made it a sunk season when it didn't have to be. And then on the coaching side, you also completely bungled your quarterback situation by ruining. I think Saleh ruined Zach Wilson's development more than anything with how
Yeah.
often he's
No, I
going in the
don't disagree
media
with
and
that.
just basically trashing him and saying, I don't know, like, I basically just inferring that he thinks he's terrible, but they don't have anything else to do. What does that do for a guy who's like, whatever he is, like 22? Like, that can't be great to hear.
No, it really
like Zach Wilson, for as bad of a quarterback as he's been, like he cares and he plays for his team.
I mean, and just to put a bit more perspective on it as well, because this thought kind of crossed my mind, and I think it's kind of a funny way to look at it. Imagine like you're doing your job, like that could be like working at McDonald's. You know what I mean? Like you could be working at McDonald's, right? You're a cashier, and you mess up like a few things, right? You're pretty new to it, you know, and all of a sudden you're like leaving work, turn on the radio right in your car, and you just hear your like manager going, you know, he really sucks, but we don't really have anything better, so we're just gonna keep him. How would you feel?
Yeah.
like it's just that type of thing, right?
Yeah, it is. And it's when you look at it from that perspective, there was also the whole story we talked about on the podcast where Zach Wilson like actively didn't. There was rumors of him actively not wanting to play. That is Salah's doing. That is because of.
And we talked about the fact that neither of us blame him. Like,
yeah, because it's just
for
been
a
an
lot of the
awfully
reasons
run
we just
organization.
mentioned. Like, it's
Yeah.
a rough situation. That thing, across the board, it's pretty bad currently over there. So
It
yeah,
is.
I don't
And
know.
you have to. I think that's kind of what the owner is realizing, and they're just trying to take this year as a kind of, you know, it's a mulligan, it's a whatever. You try again, and you do it. You run it back with the same roster next year, and the same coaches and the same everything. You just try to.
I think they have the
forget
chance
this
to be
year ever
better
happened.
next year than they would have been this year. I think they have because they have a lot of young talent that I think will just get better. They're gonna hopefully. I don't know what their cap situation is gonna look like going into this next season, but
You
hopefully they
you
should
also
have
have
the
to
chance to
remember that
grab some
Aaron
people.
Rodgers is still coming back from an Achilles injury.
Yeah.
As much as he thinks he's God, he's not.
Yeah, but in this world, we were talking about a situation where he'd be coming back, potentially still playing hurt at the end of the year. I think an extra summer makes me feel a bit better about that. I mean, you literally
It
made
does.
the comment
It does.
about
But there's
on the other side to like the comment on how you think Kirk Cousins like paycheck
Yeah.
is not going to get affected.
I think
I
he'll be,
kind of think he'll be. He'll
yeah.
be fine.
I think he'll be back and I think he'll be fine, but it's not a guarantee because he is older, and even if it's not an Achilles re-injury, it could be something else. And I don't have any faith in them to rebound after that, after what happened this season. And
Yeah,
it's
no.
just,
If he goes down,
and
again, it's over.
we also don't know if he's still up to the kind of level of play that we want, because now we haven't seen Aaron Rodgers play in a long time, and his last year with the Packers wasn't even spectacular. We've seen Jordan Love outplay him in Green Bay. Jordan
Yeah.
Love has had a better season this year than Aaron Rodgers did last year. So you put the Jets. It sucks for Jets fans. They had so much hype coming into the season, and it seemed like the right move to get Aaron Rodgers out
From
of the
not
get-go.
only for everybody involved, because I know that both me and you also had them pretty high on our rankings.
Yeah. I as much as I can dunk on them, like it's not like and again, there was other stuff they should have done after this happened.
We
But
can
it's not
both
like
admit
we
you
saw it
you
coming.
dunk on A-Rod for his personality and as a human being, not his football
Oh, yeah.
ability.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, exactly. I do. Yeah, he's a good quarterback, but he's a shitty person. So I'm, yeah, it'll be interesting. As a Jets fan, you just have to hope that Aaron Rodgers is at least close to the prime A-Rod and that he stays healthy, because
Yeah.
that's what your season's going to depend on. And I think you see, I'll end it on this because I think this is a good note. When you look at well-run teams, like, I hate to say it, like the Niners, a thing like this doesn't sink their season because they have already built a foundation that can
It
support the
didn't
rest
sink
of
their
the
season
team.
last year, although it did
Exactly.
happen. And
That's what I
although
mean.
to be fair,
Because
there's two arguments to this. It didn't happen at the beginning, which I feel like is both a positive and a negative. Because for one, their team was already working like a well-oiled machine. For one, and two, the fact that, and this is the negative,
But-
they're past the trade deadline, so they couldn't have picked anybody
Yeah.
up like the Jets could have.
But they'd already built such a good foundation that even though it did happen later in the season, they were actually. I mean, the Brock Purdy is maybe an enigma, but
I'm going to make the
It was-
argument,
it
though,
went
that I think
better.
the 49ers system works a lot better. Where, like, a lot of field generals are just, like, system
well, where
QBs
does
can
the
be
where
filled
does the
in there.
system where does the system come from? The coaches,
Okay,
right?
fair
That's where
enough.
the argument comes in.
Fair enough.
That's the kind of thing where you're looking at it and you say, like, you can put your hands in the air and say there's nothing they could have done, or you can actively try to fix it.
Yep.
And I think maybe I don't agree with it. I think it's fair to let it play,
Yeah.
but I think if this happens another year, then
No,
you
I
have
don't
to
disagree
look at
with
the
that.
system and
No.
actively do something about it.
No, and I agree with that. Wait, if it happens next year, he's done. I want to say that while I think I agree with them keeping them, I do think he's on the hot seat. I think that you need success this year.
Oh
to
yeah,
stick around.
absolutely.
I feel like that's what you were kind of saying there, like that he'd be on the hot seat. I don't think that's controversial at all. He's absolutely on the hot seat.
Yeah.
Even he knows he is. he knew he was in the hot seat the second A-Rod went down, right? Like that's not a hard.
That's not
conversation.
controversial.
Yeah, that's not controversial at all. I think that I don't know. I think we can probably move on. We are 10 seconds under an hour.
Well, there we go. Well, we fit 2 NFL segments in there, so it's a double pack.
I mean, we talked about
2 or 3, yeah.
Russ, talked about Seattle, talked about Denver, although that all can be fit under one thing. Jets,
Coaching carousel, drafts, all that QB
God,
situation.
that's so many segments that I'm not gonna make because I don't have time. Oh, lovely. Okay, next segment, probably hockey. It's hockey, right? It's probably hockey. It's probably hockey. It's probably hockey.
Yep.